N. Sri Kumar is an assistant professor of philosophy in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. He is a gold medalist for MA Philosophy from the Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam. He did his MPhil and PhD in philosophy from the Central University of Hyderabad and specializes in the areas of philosophy of language, continental philosophy, and hermeneutics. He has been into the academic profession since 1995 and has taught in Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Kaladi, Kerala and BITS Pilani, Rajasthan before joining the IIT Madras in 2003. Dr. Sri Kumar has published articles in various journals and has presented papers in national and international seminars. Some of the courses he offers include European Philosophy, Contemporary German Philosophy, Introduction to Indian Philosophy, Philosophical Hermeneutics, Philosophy and Critical Theory, and Philosophy of Language.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series in philosophy on Phenomenology and Existentialism Part 9. Before we start today's lecture, this episode, let me introduce the students, Mr. Badri Nath and Mr. Lenin CC.
Hello. Hello, sir.
Today's lecture will cover the following topics: phenomenology as a method. This issue we have already seen an overview of this issue, why phenomenology has to conceive itself as a method, because it has to overcome certain problems, certain issues. So, it has to redefine itself as a method, and what is that? So, we will not be dealing what phenomenological method is in this episode, that we will be dealing in another one, but today we will have a very brief look at this issue. The concept of absolute self evidence, this is another issue which we are going to discuss very briefly today. Then overcoming the problem of knowledge. This problem we have already seen in the previous episode. We have seen that there is a problem due to the skepticism raised by the skeptical views or the possibility of skepticism, which raises very serious objections or very serious problems as far as the question of knowledge is concerned, whether knowledge is possible at all. So, we will be addressing that issue also. Now, phenomenology as a method. Explicate the essence of knowledge. This is one of the objectives of phenomenological method. It tries to explicate the essence of knowledge. So, here we could see the whole question of method. Wherever you encounter this problem, whether it is with Plato or with Descartes, there is an objective the method aims at. Here in phenomenology, it aims at explicating the essence of knowledge, then it explores the absolute data of knowledge. We are going to see what is this data. The whole issue of essences will be discussed in today's episode. Then grasping of the essences of the object of cognition, grasp the essence of the object of cognition, then finally grounding the essence in absolute self evidence. So, these are very briefly the overall objectives of phenomenology as a method. These are the issues which it is trying to address. Now, the concept of absolute self evidence. Here it is not possible if the knower is in the natural standpoint, an issue which we have already discussed in the last episode, that natural standpoint or the natural world thesis, where the existence of the world is taken for granted, it never allows, or rather it makes it difficult to have the knower to have objective knowledge so long as he or she is in the natural standpoint. Phenomenological reduction is inevitable for self evidence, because it enables you to really overcome this natural attitude, the natural standpoint. Now, the problem of knowledge is overcoming the natural standpoint. The methodology has to really envisage the possibilities or how to overcome the natural standpoint, then overcoming the philosophical skepticism, which again we have discussed earlier, the skepticism regarding the very possibility of knowledge itself. Then by grasping the essence of the object of cognition. See, here it talks about grasping the essence, and essence more or less the term essence is used with all its traditional connotations. I said more or less, not exactly, but more or less. And here once you are talking about, or once you are concerned about the grasp of essences, or once you make the essences as your objects of cognition, then there is a lot of certainty for you, because as long as the domain of the object is concerned, it is a domain of absolute certain objects, because you are concerned about essences. Now grounding the essence in absolute self evidence, this is also very important, because though the availability of essences is assured, whether you are able to grasp it, that is another problem. How do you do that? Issues involved. So we are now going to see some of the basic issues involved when phenomenology tries to reformulate or tries to redefine itself as a method. How essences are obtained? We are talking about essences, and we said that phenomenology is concerned about the grasp of essences, or rather phenomenology is concerned about phenomena, and phenomena is nothing but constituted by essences. Now how essences are obtained, that is one of the fundamental questions. Second one, different steps in phenomenological reduction. This is an issue which we will see later. The question of, the concept of reduction, phenomenological reduction, and it is this phenomenological reduction that constitutes one of the major aspects of phenomenology as a method. So different steps involved in, what are they? We have to be concerned about that. Third one, how is consciousness related to objects? See, phenomenology is again is a study of consciousness, it is also a study of consciousness, it is a study of essences and also study of consciousness. It studies consciousness very closely, and how is consciousness related to objects is a very important problem, because on the one hand consciousness is important, and on the other hand the objects, how consciousness really reach the object, that is also important. And finally, or last but not least, you have what is the nature of essences. So we will probably start with our this today's discussion, we will start with this last issue, essences, essence and experience. Here we have to contrast it with ordinary experience, because you are talking about the experience of essences, but the term experience always calls for a kind of your understanding you have, or rather if I am permitted to use the term natural attitude again in this context, in your natural attitude also you experience, you talk about experience, you get experiences through your sense organs and mind, and but this experience of essences is different from the object giving intuition of ordinary experience.
With your kind permission, if I may interrupt you,
please.
Can you please elaborate on the point of what do you mean by object giving intuition?
Yeah, because in our normal experience what happens is that an object is given to us, and in natural attitude we have seen, see you open your eyes, your sense organs, including your eyes, will provide you certain information about the objects around you. Say for example the pen in your hand, which is its color, shape, etc. Here a particular object is given to me in my intuition with all its qualities and characteristic features, and I know so many things about it, and I presuppose so many things about this object which is given to me, its existence is presupposed or taken for granted as. So here when I say object giving intuition, this is what it is meant, and the very I am at the natural standpoint still, but and natural sciences are based on such experiences, because natural sciences, any natural science for that matter, all physical sciences rely a lot or depend a lot on such experiences, and experiments which the scientists conduct in the laboratory are nothing but an extension of this experience. They just sharpen these experiences and apply theories or put them into the framework of theories and try to interpret what happens in nature. So experience or object giving intuitions constitute the fundamental data in natural sciences. Now reality is presented in individual form as spatio-temporally existing. This is something which I have already discussed. Objects are given in space and time, they are given as objects which exist spatio-temporally, and individual and contingent objects which are particular. See, again they are particular objects, they have a particular existence, spatio-temporal. The very fact that they are spatio-temporal makes them particular and contingent. Now further, again natural knowledge is confined to this experience and its contingencies. See, we cannot really go beyond, or we cannot envisage to go beyond these particular objects and the experiences of these particular objects and all its contingencies associated with them, as far as we are concerned about knowledge or scientific knowledge. And natural science or natural knowledge is confined, is basically confined to this domain of experience. Each individual thing is contingent and could be otherwise. It could be otherwise, it is contingent. There is no necessity that an object should be as it is right now, as I know it, when I know it, when I perceive it, when I experience it. It can very well be otherwise. See the difference which David Hume, when he discussed about matters of fact and about ideas, he has pointed out like this: facts, the objects in the world, they are absolutely contingent. There is no necessity that they should be in the way they are.
Again sir, with your kind permission,
let me complete. One, see the Humean contention that there is no guarantee that the sun will rise in the east tomorrow, because facts, there is nothing that necessitate things in the factual world to happen in the way they are happening. But the ideal world or the world of necessity should be different. For example, mathematics, they are different, and we have seen that Husserl also is fascinated by the world of mathematics. He calls the world of numbers as world of essences. And here you were
no sir,
about to say something.
Clarification was
okay. Each individual thing is contingent, that is what it meant, and every individual object has a universal essence. We are coming to that. Every individual object has a universal essence. So it is this universal essence that makes individual objects transcend the contingencies or overcoming the contingencies, because this is very important as far as phenomenology as a science or as a discipline which aims at absolute knowledge or absolutely self evident knowledge is concerned. There should be a domain of essences which are never changing, which are eternal and which are universal, so that phenomenology can focus on that domain and get knowledge about objects in that domain or essences in that domain. So every individual object has a universal essence, and every contingent thing and event as an essential being, essentially the same what I have said. Everything or event has an essential being which is not contingent, which cannot be otherwise. It has to be in that particular way only, alone. A thing is a bearer of a predicate. See, a thing is a bearer of a predicate which it has in common with other things. This common thing is the essence. So we could see a slightly different way in which Husserl deals with the concept of essence here compared to the Platonic treatment of the notion of essence. We are going to see in detail what it is, in what way Plato has dealt it, and in what way Husserl's treatment is different from Plato's. We were discussing about the concept of essence. A thing is the bearer of a predicate which it has in common with other things. This common thing is called essence according to the traditional conception, and to a certain extent Husserl also accepts this view. See, for example, a musical note. This is the example given by Husserl. In order to be a note at all, it must share something with all other notes. What is that something? That something is the essence. So whatever belongs to the essence of the individual can also belong to another individual. So this is something, this essence is that something which makes you transcend, makes an object transcend its particularity and contingency. Whatever belongs to the essence of the individual can also belong to another individual. So it is not nothing exclusive, it is not very, it is not so peculiar to that one particular object alone, it is that which makes it universal. The sharing of something with all others locates the object in a particular region of things. See, this is something, the object, though it is a particular object, it belongs to a particular region. So, here we have a concept of regional ontologies are subscribing such essences.
Can you elaborate the term regional ontologies?
Yeah, this is what precisely I was trying to say, that the object is entering a region of things. So, it loses its particularity in a peculiar way, that the essences or the domain of essences, that is the region. The domain of essence of a particular object constitute the region of a particular object, the universal region of a particular object to which it belongs. So, this the essences are necessarily universals, they have to be universals. So, now we will see now the theory of essences a little bit detailed, because we have to understand this concept in what way Husserl has understood this concept. So, we cannot avoid discussion of Plato, of how Plato has discussed this concept, because Plato is one of the most important thinkers of Western thought who has discussed about essences and all that.
So, you told you gave the example of a musical note,
Correct.
which it has to share something common. Then
Yeah.
how do you distinguish a particular note from another note if everything shares something common?
See, let me ask a question to you.
If I understood it
Correct,
rightly.
correct. You are right. Let me ask a question to you in way of answering it. There is an essence of man, okay, to which you as well as me or all of us subscribe to. In what way one man I distinguish myself from you? I think this question will in a sense answer you.
Thank
I
you,
mean
sir.
at least partly, but coming to your answer proper, see, we are talking about not about particularities, not about individualities, not about peculiarities and uniqueness, rather we are talking about essences. Essences are, or the domain of essences is necessarily a domain of universals, a domain of generality, and going to the domain of generality or in the territory of generality, do not look for particularities. Okay.
I think your question was more
Yeah,
clearer than
appropriate
that.
than the answer which. So, here Plato's theory of essences, I need not tell you what Plato's theory of essences is, but very briefly we can say that he was trying to map, or he was trying to understand reality in terms of certain aspects, like reality should be eternal, it should be transcendental, it should not be subjected to change, and it should not be spatio-temporal. So, based on these assumptions, Plato conceived that, or Plato assumed that there is a universe of essences, a universe of forms, a universe of ideas which constitute what is reality, and everything else what we experience in this world, or the world of spatio-temporal objects, they are, or this world is nothing but a shadow, an imperfect imitation of this ideal world. So, this is what Plato's theory of essences, in the gist of Plato's theory of essences is, and the appearance and reality dichotomy. Now, Plato thus introduced this dichotomy into Western philosophical contemplations. Appearance, what appears in front of me, the world which I experience through my sense organs and mind, the world which is spatio-temporal, which is subjected to change, that is what it appears, but it is not the real world. The real world is the transcendental world, which is not spatio-temporal but eternal. And now reality, it is constituted of essences, is an abstraction. This is where you again further going to Plato's theory, essences are not given in experience. This is where probably you will find Husserl disagreeing with the Platonic assumption. For Husserl, experiences are also very important. This is something which we are going to see later. Experiences are very important, and again, you know, following the empiricist tradition of Locke, Berkeley and David Hume, the British empiricist, Husserl also contended that perception, or he considered perception as a primary or paradigmatic kind of experience. So, essences are not given in experience, then sense experience is an obstacle for gaining genuine knowledge. So, this is another very important theory of Plato, that sense experience is an obstacle for gaining knowledge, and all knowledge is, or real knowledge is, recollection. The Saul already knows the theory of innate ideas and all that. So, these are areas where we have to understand Husserl differently, because Husserl has totally different conceptions about knowledge and its nature and the relationship between essences and experience. Plato totally differentiated. Plato never associated the domain of essences with human experience, but according to Husserl they are not so. Now, when we come to understand this concept of essences, we will take up another important school, empiricism. We will have a very brief look of the empiricist position, and we will have a detailed look of empiricist position later in the next episode, when we discuss the image theory initiated by the empiricist. So, here the psychological explanation, Locke for example gives a psychological explanation, and his theory of abstract ideas. He says that essences are abstractions. The entire empiricist school contends that the domain of essences, or they are nothing but abstractions, and they are creations of human mind. There is nothing corresponding to essences in reality, they are creations of human mind, because universal exist only in our thoughts, and there are no universals in reality, and only individual things have real existence. They were emphasizing on particular individual things, and the possibility of universals presuppose the human ability, our ability to abstract, the mental ability to abstract thought. This is very peculiar to the empiricist doctrine of knowledge, empiricist theory of knowledge, initiated by Locke, followed by Berkeley and David Hume, where knowledge is considered as a perception of the agreement or disagreement between ideas, while ideas are created or generated by qualities of the objects, and qualities, even qualities are understood as powers to generate ideas in human mind. So, we have the power to abstraction. This is something which is repeatedly the power of abstraction, and simple ideas are put together. See, we get only simple ideas and only simple individual entities exist. Simple ideas are put together by the mind, and it further identifies the common features, and abstract ideas are formed in that fashion. We will have in Bishop Berkeley's refutation of abstract idea, the classical doctrine which goes against abstractions. We cannot frame an idea of pure space exclusive of all bodies that are in space. Then there is no internal essence or entities from where these qualities flow and whereon they depend. See, there is nothing, there is no internal essence from where qualities flow. So, the purpose of Berkeley was to deny, or was to discard the possibility of a material substance, because he was a bishop and he belongs to the Christian church, somehow wanted to establish that reality of spirit over matter. So, whatever it may be, here the empiricist epistemology has waged a war against the concept of essences, abstract ideas having corresponding reality in the world. Now, we have the notion of essences, empiricist theory of the given, the idea of the primarily given, the sense data thesis, the unprocessed data of sense experience. They are the starting points of all experience and knowledge. So, for the empiricist, it is the sense data which is the fundamental data of all knowledge. All knowledge is based on sense data, and about sense data you cannot say anything, nothing can be said about such sense data, as that implies, I mean, the very saying something about it implies their particularity is already subjected to general concepts. That is not the case. Their particularity is never and can never be subjected to general concepts in reality. What is the route from raw data to the world of intelligible objects articulated in concepts? This is an issue which we have to discuss, see now, and this is probably the Kantian tension which we have seen, where a domain of the given is essential for ensuring that knowledge is not just recollection. Kant's problem, where Kant reiterated that experience is very important. Experience is the starting point of knowledge, but at the same time the intelligibility of the world presupposes conceptualization also. Just experiences will not make knowledge. There is conceptualization. Conceptualization also is needed. So, there is a tension. How to reconcile them? The wish to attend the world as it is experienced. See, this wish we could see in Husserl also, the world as it is experienced, or reality as it is experienced, how experience gives itself to human consciousness. So, we could see that Kant also faced a similar problem, and here to understand how the intelligibility of the world is constituted. So, this problem Kant resolved this issue with the help of a theory of 12 categories and all that, and empiricism fails to do that. Rationalism also was one sided. Now, we have to see how these issues which we have already discussed are going to be relevant. We will be seeing that in the following lectures. So, before we conclude, we will have the summary, the topics which we have discussed today, the concerns of phenomenology as a method, why phenomenology had to redefine itself as a method, essence, the concept of essence and experience, the dichotomy between essence and experience, the world which we have in sense experience, and the different views of essences, where we have discussed the Platonic conception and the empiricist view, and Husserl's focus on consciousness is something which we have to conclude with. Husserl was focusing on consciousness, how objects are given in consciousness, how can you find essences in consciousness, and how the phenomenological method is going to assess this. So, before we conclude, the students can take up some questions. Why are essences so important in Husserl's phenomenology? Number 1. Number 2, what is regional ontology, the question which you asked. Number 3, explain how does Husserl counter the empiricist position with regard to essence. With this, we will end this episode. Thank you.